What if, following this path on a random Tuesday morning, you're hit with the sudden realization that this is it? There is only this pain, without rescue, relief, or retreat. What if, at the precipice of our encounter with the absurd, we see that all our preconditioned beliefs are met only by a gesture of silent indifference from the universe?
Is this really all there is?
We are left with a hollow, sinking realization that for the rest of our lives, there will only be this rock born of our pain, this disillusionment, this unexplainable sadness and disappointment. Our only response as an absurd being is a daily pushing up and against this rock, an honest effort to inch forward, bearing the pain without hoping for any intervention, physical or metaphysical. When you encounter suffering of any kind, the loss of a loved one, a rejection, a catastrophic failure, you're generally presented with a few options. As a Christian, you might reach out to God in prayer, hoping to alleviate the suffering by surrendering yourself to a greater power. As a Buddhist, you might try to pierce through the bubble of suffering, seeking to understand its root and the true identity of the self who suffers, in the hope of one day attaining nirvana. But in absurdist philosophy, doing either would be called taking the leap. It is escaping the vision and awareness of an absurd life by falling back on metaphysics and ideological doctrines. Camus, on the contrary, proposes a continuous struggle, a conscious revolt, a constant awareness of the broken link between our demands from the world and its inability to provide us with succor or meaning. To keep in view the pain born from every experience that asserts the absurd, and to live with it continuously, as Camus says, without appeal. T.S. Eliot explains this state of mind beautifully in 4 quartets. I said to my soul, be still and wait without hope, for hope would be hope for the wrong thing. The absurd individual does not fall into the pitfalls of Kierkegaard's leap into irrational belief when confronted by reasonable analysis of an unreasonable universe. He accepts the inability of the world to fulfill his need for closure, and he goes on with that dissonance always in mind. This awareness imbues his actions and thoughts without negating his desire to live. It is not an excuse to be a pessimist like Schopenhauer. I don't think the absurd life does away with the need to care or find meaning. The absurd approach is not a dismissive disavowal of traditional moral and spiritual systems in exchange for the emptiness brought about by an awareness of a world without metaphysical fulfillment. Often we mistake Marisol, the protagonist of The Stranger, as the ideal absurd hero envisioned by Camus. But The Stranger is an exploration of these ideas, rarely a perfect example of them. Camus is not vain enough to deny that it would be a better alternative if life, as we experience it, could be suffused with understanding and purpose. In fact, it is this very knowledge of a hopeless possibility that brings the absurd hero to an attitude of lucid despair, even as he carries out his daily tasks to fill the hours of an empty life. This contradiction between desire and reality can never be allowed to rest, for fear that the fire of permanent revolt might die out, or the mind might settle back into the comfort of traditional belief. There is always a temptation to frame absurdism as a philosophy where you simply stop caring about meaning, morals, or fate, moving through life with an amused cynicism. But that is a cheap dilution of the philosophy. Camus, for most of his essay, is deeply concerned with faith and meaning, precisely because he understands the lack of both. He never disavows the stubborn human instinct to find patterns and unity. He describes the absurd as that divorce between the mind that desires and the world that disappoints. My nostalgia for unity, this fragmented universe, and the contradiction that binds them together. He openly admits to his nostalgia for unity. He is not a nihilist. The absurd individual is therefore always remembering his eternal exile from that metaphysical Eden. The pain of the absurd person is that he can admit to the spirit of nostalgia, but he cannot submit to it. He dreams of a universe that is not silent, but he cannot reach it. That is what Sisyphus' rock is actually made of. The absurd life, then, is a quest to see whether one can carry this rock, push it in meaningless, repetitive circles, and still assert his freedom, rebelling by proving he is greater than the fate he was consigned to. One must imagine Sisyphus happy. We repeat this because what other option do you have for a man condemned to an eternity of repetition? In a sense, this very imagining is a revolt against despair, a wary awareness of the repetitive nature of our comic, dumb show lives is our only shield against overwhelming tragedy. This knowledge of our suffering doesn't free us from the condemnation of our human fate. It only helps us bear it better. Camus is deeply moving when explaining this toward the end of the Myth of Sisyphus. When the images of earth cling too tightly to memory, when the call of happiness becomes too insistent, it happens that melancholy rises in man's heart. This is the rock's victory. This is the rock itself. The boundless grief is too heavy to bear, but crushing truths perish from being acknowledged. Every time we are suddenly hit by the clarity of life as a brief act without a definite plot, we, like Sisyphus, walking back down the hill, become greater than our suffering. Our awareness of our hell and our willing embrace of it partially frees us from the absolute hold it would otherwise have on us. We still have to go on with the same life, but we do it present moment after present moment with a heavy heart and a radiant smile, living quantitatively, if not qualitatively. It sounds, frankly, absurd, but that's the point.